because my friend and I have both had discussions about the criminal justice system and how it involves race. And I love to take time to listen to Senator Kennedy because I think he is fair-minded and, frankly, someone who is seeking the same ends as I am, which is a system that is just and fair, not just on racial lines, but a system that is independent from politics, a system that is that truly is, for instance, Monroe as one of his favorite communities there, where my great-grandmother, we call her Big Mama, is buried. With my friend here, because my friend and I have both had discussions about the criminal justice system and how it involves race. And I love to take time to listen to Senator Kennedy because I think he is fair-minded and, frankly, someone who is seeking the same ends as I am, which is a system that is just and fair, not just on racial lines, but a system that is independent from politics, a system that is that truly is equal in how it deals with all that come before them. And I just want to say in closing, without asking questions I will submit to each of the witnesses for the record, I know in my heart that this is what you all seek as well, a system of justice in our country, whether it's with law enforcement, Mr. Davis, or as our two judges know, that is fair. As a boy growing up, I would remember the days that my father would come home from a long work in New York, cross the George Washington Bridge, and would come home frustrated from being the number of times he was pulled over by police officers. And I remember that years before I would ever drive a car, beginning to have that conversation with my dad about the dangers he felt, especially coming into, we were the first black family to move into a community, the dangers of, as a black man, driving into the suburbs in which we lived. I remember a judicial system that worked for my community. Kids in my community did wrong. They broke crimes, drug laws. Some of my friends on senior cut day did some breaking and entering. But I remember the right thing happened. There were station house adjustments for them. Parents were called, and charges weren't filed. I moved to California to go to Stanford University. At Stanford, which is an extraordinary place, and I know the leadership of the university gets frustrated when I mention it, but I saw a lot of drugs being used there. And it was a justice system, again, that people did not have fear of. But in East Palo Alto, it was different. I went on myself to have experiences with police in Palo Alto, though. First time I've ever had guns drawn on me was driving. First time I've ever feared for my life behind the wheel of a car was in California, being screamed at officers, being accused of stealing the car that I was driving. When I finally lived in a community, a low-income community that I live in now, I saw the same children, just so similar in every way to the kids I grew up with in the affluent suburbs of New Jersey, have a very different reality with law enforcement. I saw the charges that they got for crimes that were dismissed amongst kids that I went to school with in college and that my friends did in high school. I watched how a system that was intended to be fair saw them as different. I began visiting prisons and jails and would meet children that would sit in prison for months and months and months before they even had their trials. I watched children being put into solitary confinement who hadn't even been convicted. This is something that other countries call torture because of its psychological effects on children. I have to say, I sit here now as a United States Senator, just the fourth black person ever to be popularly elected to this office, still worried that there are many Americans that just don't feel our justice system is fair. These are perceptions. And a lot of the data, though, affirms this, that control studies have been done, and I've worked with people in conservative think tanks and liberal think tanks who have the same data and come to the same conclusions, that, for example, there's no difference in usage of marijuana for African Americans or white Americans, but blacks will be arrested for usage at multiple times higher than white folks. In fact, we now have young people in this country. In 2019, there was more marijuana arrests, 90% or so were for possession, than all violent crimes combined. And so we now have young people, 20 years old, with a criminal charge for doing things that 2 of the last 4 presidents admitted to doing, and many of my colleagues have admitted to doing. And what it means to a young man in my neighborhood who has a criminal charge for possession of marijuana, for example, it means they can't get a job at a fast food restaurant. It means they can't get a business license. It means they can't get a loan from a bank. And so I am grateful for this hearing. I'm grateful for the questioning of my colleagues. But there is something we as a country have to do. And all of us are actors within this system to establish more faith in that system. More faith from law enforcement to the judicial system, to our prison system, to establish in this country what is necessary for a democracy to function is that the people of the nation believe that the systems are fair and just and manifest the best of human values, empathy, compassion, and ideals of restorative justice. It's a tall order for anyone. And there's good faith folks on both sides that wrestle with this. And so before I call this hearing to a close and say my closing remarks, I want to say thank you to everybody. And I want to ask my colleague who's raising his hand he'll say the last non-scripted words before I call this hearing to a close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I